having a bit of a change from Feminine Gospels today. My revision focus is To His Coy Mistress by Andrew Marvell. So I thought I'd make a video on that, and I'm going to do my best to limit myself to 15 minutes. So where I've got notes that are written, I'm not planning to read through them. I will be speaking through other notes, so it might be that after the video is finished you want to go back, pause it and read through my notes. So this poem is by Andrew Marvell. He was a metaphysical poet writing in the 17th century. Now, to give it a very brief overview, so the voice of the poem is a male speaker, which suggests patriarchy, and the speaker is pragmatic. In terms of imagery, there's reference to time, there's biblical allusions, there are biblical allusions, sorry, and there's use of blazon and conceit. It has three main themes. These are Tempus Fugit, which is translates to time flies, Carpe Diem, which translates as seize the day, and Memento Mori, which is a reminder of death. It's addressed to a woman, giving the theme of male/female erotic love. Language-wise, we've got imagery. It's mainly in the first person, but there is also use of the second person. Time is constant diction. The diction is flowery, as is typical of metaphysical poets, and it's humorous. Structure-wise, there are three stanzas. These can be called the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, which translate into English in terms of this poem as first stanza describes the ideal, second stanza describes the real, and the third stanza describes the action which should be taken. It's written in heroic couplets. Okay, so the poem starts off, that looks like it's part of the poem is the title. The poem starts off with, if not a question, conditional. So, had we but wild enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime, which automatically sets up that her coyness is a crime. That's rather interesting, since in the 17th century, coyness in women would have been a sign of her connection to the Madonna whore complex and Virgin Mary. Generally, coyness would be seen as a positive virtue in a woman. So automatic suggestions of male desire and male corruption. Then, throughout this first stanza, there is the use of the conditional, often the second conditional. In terms of contextual references, you've got the Indian Ganges and the river Humber. So, Great River and the Indian Ganges is associated with wealth, whereas the Humber is a pretty standard estuary in northern England. So what you've got in that comparison is he's suggesting that she is beautiful, that she has wealth, that she is perfect, whereas he is ordinary. So it's a deep form of flattery because of the difference in the ideas. We have a degree of blazon imagery with links to her physical appearance, and it's just worth noting how long she spends on each different or how long he spends on each body part. So 100 years on the eyes and the forehead. So eyes are often seen as the doorway or the gateway to the soul, intimate, and the forehead would be a sign of wisdom. 200 to adore each breast. So there's a degree of sexuality in his idea of loving her breast, and also nursing and emphasising her role as a mother. And then 30,000 to the rest. So he's gone for two very specific things and then almost lumps everything else together, and but does give it a very long time, because obviously 30,000 years is a very long time. As I mentioned above, it is quite hyperbolic, and it's clear. But you've got his importance about how he wants to show his adoration, and again he is attempting seemingly to flatter her. Now, when he refers to the last age, that's suggesting the millennium, not the next millennium, which was obviously 2000, but the millennium in the 1,000 years when Jesus is on earth before the final day of judgment. And it was thought one of the dates for the millennium was given as 1656, perhaps suggesting that it was written earlier in this time period rather than later. And that's what the last age refers to. And the idea of showing your heart links into the idea of judgment, but it also suggests that her love is the most important. And what he's assuring her is that his love would not reduce with time. What we have here's the second stanza and the third stanza. So you've got the continuation of this time diction, and it's worth picking up on Time's winged chariot, because time was often personified in this manner. Time, the idea of a winged chariot, I've said they're fantasy and idealism, but it's also quite impending. Clearly, if you were being chased by a chariot, that wouldn't be particularly fun. Interestingly, in these lines, he is transgressing norms of the period by removing any idea of afterlife. During the 17th century, Christianity would have been a very common feature in life. So actually, by suggesting that it doesn't exist, that's almost heretic. We've also got in these two stanzas, as in the first stanza, there's a use of irregular enjambment and caesura, which results in an animated tone. The poem comes with influence from the love elegy tradition, and the heroic couplets can be seen to show his continuous desire which is never lessening. The poem is written in iambic pentameter, and almost every line has interestingly, we'll hear where he's referring to youthful hue which sits on thy skin like morning dew. He is suggesting sweat, and again it might seem strange now, but talking about sweat, as Milton makes clear in some of his poetry, sweat was sexual in the 17th century. And there is a lot of sexual imagery in this poem. And then you've got the contrast between birds of love and birds of prey. In the end, the final two lines where the sun stands still, that's an allusion to Joshua 10. Now, I've gone through those parts of the poem really quite quickly, and I would encourage you to go back and read my notes. Here I have 3 paragraphs that I've written. I'll include a picture of each of these where it's going to be easier to read, there's more focus on them. But for now, I want to look very quickly at the themes. So these are the themes which I have associated with not just this poem, but looking at the AQA pre-1900 poetry anthology for love through the ages, which is why some themes are not filled in. So romantic love, there is typical romantic imagery within the poem, typical romantic language. There's a lot of sexuality within the poem. He wants sex, and he's talking about her virginity and whether her virginity is worth it. He seems afraid of losing her. So there's a social convention of the romantics, the use of flattery, the traditional imagery, the idea of time, long-lasting love. And that's contrasted with desire. And he appears to be, similarly to John Donne in The Flea, asking the woman to have extramarital sex, which is breaking social conventions and taboos. Time is perhaps the key theme in this poem. He wants, or feels that he should want, to spend as much time with her as he can. He tries to use the amount of time he wants to spend with her to justify why they should actually get together now, and he feels like he's running out of time. Truth and deception, I think he's trying to be truthful. Proximity and distance, so you've got how close death is, really, and within the sexual illusions there is a sense of intimacy, and there's also the contrast between the Ganges, which are in India, and the Humber, which is in northern England, which are round about 5,000 miles apart. He seems to be trying to gain her approval. In terms of nature, we've got warm imagery, deserts and the rivers. I don't think betrayal is a particularly key theme. He is trying to seduce her. She appears quite unachievable, and context-wise is a metaphysical poem. So I'm going to stop there. It's about 15 minutes. And as I say, I'll include pictures of those paragraphs and close-ups of my annotations if you want to pause the video and read through them. Thank you.